is Dave Dye, and I'm married to my wife Joan. We've been married now for almost 47 years. I would like to thank Sister Lydia here from Willow Praise to give me an opportunity just to share a few things with you. I think if you hear me out, that quite possibly that it will be a blessing to you. To give you some brief background of myself, before I was a Christian, my family life wasn't the best. My dad was an alcoholic, and I don't need to belabor that point. It's tough growing up in that kind of lifestyle. It was hard, and my mom was always there for me, whereas my dad wasn't as much. He took care of us, but we had not much of a relationship. It's true, they say, when you grow up in an alcoholic household, if you don't know the Lord, that it spreads. When I started drinking when I was 16, and when I was 17, we went out drinking a lot. But the Lord was working in that time frame. My mother, at one time when she was separated from my father, she went to a Billy Graham concert. Or not a concert, but a service in Cleveland in 1972. And it was a Sunday afternoon when she went, and there was a big storm that morning, and it cleared, and they had the service. Now, when your mom tells you something, nobody's closer to you than your mom, and she came home from this service, and her face was glowing. And I said, and she says, "David, you're not going to believe what happened to me." And I said, "What do you got?" And she said, "It came time for prayer, and I bowed my head, and we closed our eyes." And she said, the Lord just literally appeared right in front of her with his arms open, reaching out to her. And when your mom tells you something like that, that hits home. Because we weren't going to church at the time. Nobody was. And that was probably one of the earliest seeds that was truly planted in my heart. Other than a dream I had when I forgot about this, had a dream when I was 6 years old. One of the first dreams that has never left me. They say when you have a dream from the Lord, one of the first tell signs is it doesn't go away, it stays with you. Well, this is over 60 years ago that I had this dream. And I was sitting in someone's lap. Didn't know who it was, but the love and the peace that I felt was absolutely overwhelming. And I'm sitting literally in a paradise setting. Now, mind you, I'm 5-6 years old. And I didn't know who this person was, but I was sitting in his lap. And he said, "You got a ways to go. The day's going to come when you're going to come back here with me." And later, of course, I learned that was the Lord himself. And that dream that I had many years ago has stuck with me to this day. Well, in high school, I drank like most of my other friends. I stayed away from all drugs. I graduated in 74 from Wycliffe, Ohio. And stayed away from all the drugs. They were just starting to get out. I had nothing to do with it, but I did drink a lot. Drank like a fish. I loved my Colt 45 and whiskey, unfortunately, but that's the way it was. And I remember on the Friday nights we would go out, and my favorite band was Grand Funk Railroad, and the lead singer being Mark Farner, who wrote most of their music. Something strange about the music that got to me. I love the music itself, but peppered all throughout their career, Mark Farner wrote most of the songs, and they dealt with the Lord every now and then. And little did I know that he got saved when he was 9, but he was kind of in a backslid condition. But once the Lord grabs you, never let you go. And there were different songs, especially Closer to Home, which will be played at my funeral. If you've never heard it, well, you got to listen to it. Anyway, Joan and I met in the last week of high school. We were in the homeroom same year for 4 years. We didn't meet we never talked to one another, to my knowledge, till the last week of high school, and we instantly hit it off. We got married in 1976. And we moved into a motel, or a hotel an apartment in Wycliffe. And there was a young Christian couple that lived there. I never got to meet them. We never did. But they were leaving, we called them Chick Tracts. They were made by Chick Publications. And there was they were booklets, and they still make them today. And I don't have the original one that worked, but I have a whole box of them at home called This Was Your Life. And it detailed the gospel, but it also detailed a man's life that doesn't know the Lord, which is who I was. And right at the end of the track, it had a literal how to get saved, how to, you ask the Lord for forgiveness, you ask him into your heart, you're willing to turn from your sin, you're willing to live for him. And that's what was paraphrased at the back of this book. Well, it was a Thursday night in June 1976. Joan played volleyball back then, even twice a week. And she was gone. I was by myself. I was in the apartment, and a Hollywood movie came on. It was called Sodom and Gomorrah. It came out in the 60s. Starred, I think, Stuart Granger. Every now and then you'll see it on TV. And although it was, it was a Hollywood drama, it got the point across. At the end of the movie, it showed where Lot realized where he was. He had to get out of there. It's a very sinful area, very bad. If you know anything about Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed by God himself. And he called out to God, and the movie it showed where some angels appeared, talked to him, told him to leave the city, to get out. I'm by myself. I am not in a church. There was just me and the TV. And I'm sitting there, and this track was near because I didn't throw it away. I left it on the table. That movie was my altar call. I grabbed that book. I got up from my couch, turned around, kneeled down, asked the Lord in my heart, did exactly what the book said to do. I did my best to repent to my day. You do your best to turn from sin on a daily basis. And I got saved. For a year, I had no church. All it was just me and the Lord. And I remember I didn't have any friends other than all my old friends. I still went to all the parties. Back then, I was known as the life of the party. That's who I was. You pulled me full of alcohol. Instead of being depressed, it's like somebody flipped the switch. I had people laughing, telling jokes. I had a great time with my friends. Well, now I'm a Christian. I didn't want to drink anymore. I didn't want to do those things anymore, but I still love my friends. And I'll never forget going to the parties that I started to ruin the parties. And it wasn't that I was in there all glum and unhappy, and it was quite the opposite. I was actually having more fun then than I was when I was drinking. And I was having fun because I loved my friends. I loved being around them. And it started to bother them because I was having more fun then than I used to have. They couldn't understand it, and I tried to explain it to them. Well, the beauty of it is now that most of those, my friends, are now Christians. Isn't that amazing? I cannot help but think that somewhere along the line I planted a seed somewhere or another. So we joined the Church of God in 77. I had no church for a whole year, but I was still growing in the Lord because reading my Bible, doing what I was supposed to do. I was doing well. But my nephew, he came home from the service. He was in North Carolina. He started going to this one church, and he invited me. I said, okay. So I was in the Church of God in Euclid for 15 years. Was baptized in the Holy Ghost in 1977 in November of that year. But I was dealing with a very bad sickness. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in early 1975, hospitalized many times. 1982, they say Crohn's disease can kill you, but it can. I had developed, or my intestines had squeezed closed. They were swollen up. I had a blocked intestine. Diarrhea throwing up very, very bad. And it took forever that night for me to go to the hospital. They done some tests, and they told me I needed surgery. And they said either do it tonight or do it tomorrow, do it in a couple weeks, or just keep going like you did. I decided to wait 2 weeks, and this was a miracle in my life, because when they opened me up, they took out the section, they found stuff that the x-rays didn't show. One of them was my intestine was perforated. Now you put 2 and 2 together, that spells peritonitis. I was in toxic shock that night, and they didn't know, they did not realize it until later, and talked to a doctor friend of mine, and I explained the symptoms. He goes, yeah, you were in toxic shock. How I did get peritonitis, God only knows. That took my brother-in-law out in the 90s. I know the dangers of it. I should have died, because the waste going out like it should goes out into your system. That will kill you. That's one miracle in my life. 2 years later, I'm not feeling any better. Still weighed 120 pounds. And you could look at me now and you could see I'm not 120 pounds. Well, one night we were in revival, and I asked the preacher if he could pray for me after the service. He asked me, do you believe God could heal you tonight? I went, yes. Then he asked me again, do you believe the Lord can heal you tonight? And I didn't answer him right away. And I said, yeah, I do. And he prayed for me, and one of the few times in my life I was slain in the spirit, I went down. I wasn't out. I was out. I've been out in the spirit before, but I was awake, but I couldn't get up. And from here was kind of like a semi-numb, and that semi-numb was God's presence. And I laid on the floor for, how long was it, Joan? 3.5 hours. And it was 11:30 at night. They were having a birthday party for the pastor, coincidentally. Well, coincidences, God deals in those. Well, anyway, they had to help me up. I couldn't drive home. Joan had to drive home. And the next morning I went to work, and she told me, I think that Monday night, she goes, David, she goes, I believe the Lord touched you. It was obvious. But I won't believe that he did any healing until you start putting on some weight. And I went, that is a very fair assessment. Well, 6 weeks from that day, I put on 15 pounds. I am now bouncing around close to 200, if you can believe that. I received a great measure of healing. I have not seen a doctor for it since. No medication whatsoever. We're talking since 1982. The Lord touched me in 84, so nothing. Doctor said, well, that's a fluke. And I said, well, Christians know better, because God intervened. I'm going to fast forward here a little bit. I'm skipping through some of the highlights, but I want to talk about a little bit about the year 2011. Every time I hear that year, I get a cold chill, because it reminds me of where I was at and what was happening. I was in the church. We were in Christian Life Church in Mentor, Ohio. And the Lord had us involved in great many ministries. Joan and I were elders. I was on a worship team. I played the bass guitar. I worked the altars. I did great. We did, between the two of us, we had every age covered, I think, over the years. And something started stirring my heart, and it wasn't good. I told one of my dear brothers that, Alan, I said, I feel like something's ready to snap. And I said, and not in a good way. You see, I had been doing for years, I had been doing everything but what God had called me to do. And that was to be in pastoral ministry. Although being an elder is somewhat pastoral, it is not. That is the pastor's job. That is the pastor's office. The pastoral team, that's what they do. And I wasn't there. And for whatever reason, it didn't click. It didn't happen. But something started to go crazy. Well, I didn't know what crazy was until a couple of months later. All of a sudden, my job, I didn't lose my job was taken from me. I got involved in I was a union man. I got involved in a very nasty labor dispute, and if you're a good union, you never cross a picket line. I didn't. As time went on, my job was I was replaced. My wife, all of a sudden her job dried up. She got laid off. My son, who was working with me at the time, same thing. He never crossed. His job was taken from him. It was a bad situation. In that time frame, anything that could go wrong did. I'm a drag racer. My drag race car broke so bad I didn't have the money to fix it. My tow vehicle. Okay. So things started to get bad. I was getting very little money. Fortunately, our house was paid for, but started running out of money real fast. And then it really started to get bad. It stepped up. I didn't understand what was happening to me. In a scriptural term, I thought I was living the life of Job. Anything that could go wrong did. The heavens dried up. I couldn't get a hold of God. Everything was going wrong. And then it really started going bad. I felt like I was going to snap. Literally, I felt like, it wasn't suicidal, nothing like that. I felt like I was going to have a nervous breakdown. I put myself in the hospital because things were going wrong. And that night I had a dream. And in the dream, I was back when I was younger, living in my house that I grew up in, and a storm started to show up. I could see the green trees, I could feel the warm breeze. All of a sudden I felt the temperature change, I felt the temperature drop. I felt the cold rain on my arms. My best friend at the time was standing next to me, and he says, we need to get some shelter because this is a bad one. So I ran home. I was right across the street, got in the basement. The storm came, and I remember seeing it coming as I'm running downstairs. It was a tornado. It was a white tornado. Not a black one, but a white one. And I learned somewhere along the line, in the dreams, when they're black, they're from the enemy. When they're white, they're from the Lord. I have no idea where that came from. I learned it later. Whatever it was. Storm came, storm blew away, and I crawled out from what was left of my house. And I crawled out, and I'm standing on the ground, and I'm looking the other way, and I turn around. The house is gone. And I see this yellow tape all the way around the house, what was left of it. And there was a man standing there. And he said to me, you're going through a bad storm, the house is gone, but leave, the foundation's fine. And that was the purpose of the yellow tape. Don't touch it. He said, the foundation is fine. It's perfect, he said. Leave it alone. And I learned to come as when this all was over, that my foundation is what? It's in Jesus Christ. That man was either an angel or the Lord himself. He said, and he stressed that. Leave the foundation alone. There was nothing wrong with my walk. There was nothing wrong. I was doing nothing wrong. It was something else was happening. Well, the storm stayed. It didn't go away miraculously. I stayed in there a couple of days. They knew I wasn't suicidal. I had a chance to catch my breath. Then my wife got sick. She got so sick I had to take her to the hospital. They said her gallbladder was ready to explode. It was full of gallstones. Now that, to some people, is a routine operation. Well, they told us, but that's not the real problem. And I'm like, what? They go, her kidneys are ready to shut down. And I said, well, that's the gallbladder, right? They go, no. Yeah, gallbladder has nothing to do with it. And I couldn't get it out of my head. I said, it's the gallbladder. I said, no. And I said something like 3 times. They said, no. Her kidneys are in very bad shape. She has to stay in the hospital until we can try to get her kidney levels through a bunch of medication to get it back where it belongs, at least for the surgery. She was in there a week. Finally, they did the surgery, and her kidneys were so bad, they called us back in, I think it was like a week later, I think we went to see the kidney doctor, and they told us, at the bare minimum, you are looking at dialysis for the rest of your life. but she really needs a kidney transplant. And once again, I wouldn't let go of this gallbladder thing. She goes, no, it's not the gallbladder. I do not hide my emotions very well. My wife does, but she was scared to death because kidney disease runs in her family. Kidney transplants, kidney cancer, kidney diet, all of it. And if nothing else, now the level of what's happening was stepped up. And I went back to my church. Prayer was made. We were at Christian Life Church in Menor, and prayer was made. And she had to go back. They ran 27 separate comprehensive tests. And they had to determine exactly what was wrong. So I'll never forget this day. I was at my date. I had gotten a new job. It wasn't as good as the other one, but I was there. And I got the call, we want you to come back to work. Okay? And I come back, and I told them, I need to go home, and, I'm done. I'm going back to my old job. Thank you for the opportunity. And they let me go home. I go home, I get another call. It's from my wife. She goes, we got the results back from the 27 tests. And they said, we don't know what happened. We can't understand, but your kidneys are fine. They're not only that, but they're getting better. We don't know what happened. Well, we knew what it was. Somebody got a hold of God. Maybe it was me, maybe it was her, maybe somebody in the church. But a lot of people were praying. I think it was a collective group prayer from Christian Life Church that got us through it. And it didn't end there. This happened. I jumped ahead of myself because that one excited me so. But there's one that goes with this. A week before my wife's kidneys went bad, I was at work. I just started at 7 o'clock. My son's not there. He's actually working with me. I get a call. But it's not him. It was his phone, but it wasn't him talking. Here it's a paramedic. They said, your son was involved in a really bad car accident. He lives in Hartsgrove. You need to get out here. And I went, oh, okay. I left work. I said, I got to go. And I drove out there, and it took me 45 minutes to get out there. And I looked at the accident scene. He was driving a Ford Tempo that I have. There's no airbags in Ford Tempos. And I looked, and what had happened, there was a bad storm that come through. A tree branch came down right where he was at. It caused him to go across the road, right through a utility pole. And it wasn't a telephone pole, it was electrical pole. And the ground was wet, and the ground was still smoking because the wire was still on. They had not shut the power off yet. It was still hot. And I got to see him. He was in the ambulance. He had a concussion, but he was awake. He might have clicked off for a second in the car, but something happened after the accident. He said he was getting ready to get out of the car. And he said, all of a sudden, this lady appeared right there. She just showed up. Do not get out the driver's door. Get out the passenger door. And he listened to the lady. He got out the passenger door. He got out of the car, turned around, shut the door. It's gone. The lady is nowhere to be found. If he would have went out the passenger door, and he told me this again just 3 days ago, he said, I would have stepped right on that wire and I'd have been gone. And he told me then, and he says, I can't explain it. And I said, well, that had been an angel. And because he told us, I don't know if it was a lady or an angel, but I wanted to thank her, but she was gone. And so that was somewhat of a miracle that happened. And it was the very next week, and I know I jumped ahead of myself. I got the call from job. I got the call from my wife. 3 miracles right in a row. And it didn't end there. My company called me back. Out of 250 people, only 2 people got a raise. I got a $3 an hour raise. My son got a $7 an hour raise because he got a better job. He ended up working in Euclid in my company where I used to work 30 years ago. So things started to settle down. It was towards the end of the year now. First weekend of January comes up. And as tradition, we always had prayer and fasting that first Saturday. And we had prayer. And at the end of done praying, we prayed for all the church leaders. And Joan and I were the last ones to be prayed for. And one man that we had great respect for, every now and then the Lord will give him a word of prophecy or a word of encouragement or knowledge, however you want to put that. But it was God, it wasn't him. And he says, this is what I see from you two. He says, I see you as a rubber band being pulled as far back as you could go. And then all of a sudden the rubber band was let go and you went completely in the other direction. And that told me instantly that whole scenario that we went through was all from God. Because not only, there was a lot of bad things that happened to us, and there's many more things that I could bring up that I didn't. Everything that was taken from us was not only restored, but added to. We were blessed. And I said, God, you brought all this for a reason. Because I still had that feeling in my heart that I feel like I was going to snap. That never went away. And when he said that broke. And I knew that God brought us that to get my attention. We needed to be about what God wanted us to do. We didn't leave. We would have left years earlier. But I love my pastor. We loved our pastor so much, I didn't want to leave. And the Lord said, who are you following? Are you following your pastor or are you following me? And my pastor was Pastor Nip, and I love him so dearly. I don't know what else to say. So we made the move. We went completely out of our what is that term? Comfort zone. And we went to a church that we didn't know a single soul other than the pastor that we had met a couple times. And Pastor Jim Porostowski is our pastor now. We're Lakeshore Assembly. But there's a part that I left out, and I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. I talked a little bit about what God has done, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, but that's some of the good things. In 2010, going back a little bit, I woke up one morning and my back hurt. And for the next period of close to 12 years, I saw 6 doctors, 6 different doctors through different, it was Kaiser, then it was Health Span, then Medical Mutual. Because we had to change coverages for varied reasons. I saw 6 different doctors, and they all told me the same thing. There's nothing wrong with your back. You just have a little disc degeneration. There's nothing wrong. But I was in a great deal of pain. And they started me way back in 2010. They started me on muscle relaxers. Let me see, I'll do this the best from memory. Muscle relaxers. Then it went to Tramadol. Then it went to Vicodin. Now we're entering the narcotic zone. I still hurt. Then they went to Percocet. I still hurt. Then they went to morphine sulfate, synthetic morphine. I still hurt. Then they changed it to methadone. I still hurt. Then they went to fentanyl. I still hurt. Then they went on to this stuff that was stronger than fentanyl, believe it or not. I can't even think, I think it was called oxymorphone. Even that just sounds deadly to me. I still hurt. And the day came when I had a big box of all of these drugs, and I remember taking them into the doctor, putting them on his desk, and I said, look, number one, there's something wrong with my back. You haven't found it. Number two, none of these pills are helping. I said, I can't function on most of these. So we worked ourselves way back to Percocet and Tramadol. I was taking 5 Percocet, 6 Tramadol every day just to function. And in that time frame, 24 different epidural type injections. They kept trying something different. Nothing worked. And now we are in the year 2021. Now I got something else going on. I started having chest pains at night, and I blew it off. They were just in the center of my chest, and I didn't feel right. Something was wrong. And you have hypochondriacs, then you have people like me. I am the opposite. I put stuff off. I keep thinking it's going to get better. Well, that's probably just as bad as a hypochondriac, maybe even worse. I put it off all summer long until one night, it was the first week in October. My son took me to a ball game. We went to see a baseball game. And after the game, we went to the parking garage. I walked up 3 flights of steps, and I'm like, uh-oh. And I didn't say nothing to him, and he got so mad at me that I didn't. I said, and I wasn't out of breath, but I'm like, something wrong. And I didn't want to tell him because after a ball game, you know what it's like, big traffic jam. He was going to panic. I said, Lord, just let me go home. I promise I'll go see the doctor. Well, I took 3 more weeks until I was at a Bible study one night, and I was talking to one brother. I was telling him what was going on, and there was somebody from another church who just happened to be at the Bible study, and he heard it. Well, he's a paramedic. He lost it. He got mad at me. He says, why aren't you at a doctor? And I said, he gave me aspirin. He says, I want you to go to the doctor when you leave here. This is what he did. He's a paramedic. So I didn't. I waited till the next day. I called the doctor. He got me in immediately. He gave me an EKG, and he went, nope. Sent me right down to a cardiologist. Went to a cardiologist, and he went, nope. He wrote down a picture of a heart, and he goes, this is what's going on. Your main artery is 98% blocked. So he didn't send me home. He sent me right across the street to the hospital, Lake West. So they got me in for a heart cath. They got me, and I was all alone. Joan wasn't there. My wife wasn't there. My son wasn't there. But the Lord was with me, and I remember them putting the needle in my arm, and I got scared. I wasn't scared of dying. I knew where I was going. All of that was fine, but I got scared. And now, and I'll tell you why, and I didn't know it at the time. And I said, Lord, things happening too fast, whatever. I prayed. I said, I'm legitimately scared. Well, I had a reason to be, and I didn't know why. Until after the test, I had a stroke. Literally split down the middle on the right side. The right half of me was half numb. I couldn't hear, and I thought it was a mini stroke. Well, to this day, this right arm's still not quite right, so it was a real stroke. And the doctor came in, and he goes, well, he says, you don't have any blockage. And I'm like, well, what the heck's the matter with me? He said, you have the smallest arteries and veins I've ever seen in an adult heart. That and alone is a miracle in itself, considering for 50 years I've eaten McDonald's, for at least three times a week. So anyway, the Lord looks past that sometimes. So I'm in the hospital for a few days, and now the real drama starts. If you thought that was drama, well, the real drama is about to start. 2 days later, I'm out of the hospital. I go see my pain management doctor. I'm not going to mention any doctor's names through all of this. He was the third or fourth pain management doctor that I had seen. And he greeted me with, "I can no longer see you." This is how I was greeted when I walked in the door. "I can no longer see you because I will no longer take your health insurance." Things have changed over the years. And well, here's a list of insurance companies you can try. And I learned over years not to listen to my mind, but to listen to my heart. And the reason being, the Lord lives here. And my heart's not going to lead me astray. And I did not feel comfort at all changing insurance policies. But so I knew I had to change doctors, and I knew that this was going to be a tough thing. Just to give you an idea how bad it got, in 2015, I was a group leader. I ran everything in my shop. I was the boss. I come in and there'd be 10 projects every morning. In my mind would go and I handled it perfectly. Everything was going right. And it got so bad that for a year's time, I was taking 5 Percocet, 6 Tramadol, and then I got home from work. And I didn't want to do this, but I did it because it was a cheap painkiller. For the first time in 40-some years, I started drinking, and I did it to kill pain. It was a cheap painkiller. So I was doing 6 Tramadol, 5 Percocet, then anywhere from 6 to 9 shots of Black Velvet every night. I had to, so I could sleep, so I could cut some of the pain. The pain never went away, but at least I was able to sleep. Crazy thing was, I had an FMLA, and I was missing less time when I did that. Crazy as it sounds. This went on for a whole year. This is how bad it was. I was not drug addicted. I was drug dependent. I was very dependent on it because they said there was nothing wrong with me, but I was in an awful lot of pain. And a year went by like that, and my son was working with me. Again, it's rare that a father gets to work with his son. I was his boss. And he come up to me one day and he goes, "Dad," he says, "you know you're living the life of a rock star." And I said, "Well, I guess with the drugs and alcohol, I can't argue with that." I said, "I'm in too much pain. I can't live with it. My motor skills were gone. And if I didn't take it, the pain would go skyrocket. My motor skills were shot." And he says, "You can't keep doing this." And I said, "I know." I said, "I don't know what to do." And oddly enough, once again, this was not a coincidence. It couldn't have been no more than 2 weeks after that. I didn't go to church that much because the only thing I could do was go to work. It was so hard for me to function. And I was a church weird. Now we're at Lakeshore Assembly. Pastor Jim Porosowski, my pastor, and I'm sitting in the back of the church, had my head down, had my eyes closed. And I looked up and I'm surrounded. The whole church came around me and they said, "We've come to pray for you." And I went, "Bring it." And the Lord touched me that day. And the very next day, the alcohol, I no longer needed the alcohol. I was able to cut the Tramadol from 6 to 2 with that prayer. God did something in my back. I don't know what, but it cut the pain some, and I reacted to it because I didn't want to be on any of this junk. It's not me. And I felt a little better, but the pain was still nagging, albeit the pain had gone down to where I just needed the perks. They were the mildest Percocets they had. I worked myself down from 5 to 4, but that was as far as I could go. It was the pain. Anyway, let's get back to where I was when the doctor said, "I can no longer see you." So I got a new pain management doctor. Pain management. Don't get me started on pain management. First thing he tells me, he didn't say hi, hello. he says, you can't be taking these pills anymore you've been taking. I'm like, I said, that's the only thing that helped me, because I could function and it still cut the pain. And then he started fooling around with what I was taking and everything else, and then I made the decision. It was a very heartfelt, deep decision. And Joan, my wife was sitting over there. She was at church that morning, and she was so burdened with the way what was happening to me. And the Lord confirmed to her that I was going to be getting off the pills. She knew it before I did. That's the beauty of this. She knew it before I did. She came home and she told me what the Lord shared me, and I said, well, that's a coincidence. I love God's coincidences. I said, I made the decision to pull the plug. When my Percocet prescription had ended, I stopped taking it. I quit going to pain management, and I want to tell you that I'm being as honest as I can. Between the stroke and just quitting the pills cold turkey, physically it was the most toughest thing I've ever dealt with. For the next 4 to 5 months, I did nothing but, I had a hospital bed because that's the only way I could sleep. I would sleep, I'd wake up, and it was the same thing every morning. Lord, I wanted to die. I felt that bad. And if you ever thought about taking drugs, take a second and third thought on it. When I'm talking narcotics. And like I said, I was not the drug addict. I stayed away. But I had to. I needed that for the pain. For 4 months, 5 months, somewhere in that area, it was every morning was the same. I'd get up. Lord, I had no desire to do anything. Every day of my life, I got a wrench in my hand. I am a purebred gearhead. I've been drag racer for over 35 years. I would have been doing it longer if it wasn't for the Crohn's disease. And I'm constantly working on my old cars, albeit it's a little slower now, but I still do it. I didn't touch a wrench. I did nothing. I sat on my recliner for that long a time in my pajamas, and I would go back to bed. Until this one morning, my eyes opened up, and the Lord greeted me. I mean, he greets me every morning, but he greeted me a little differently. He said, David, I want you to get up. That alone was a decision I had to make. And he says, when you get up, now I want you to put your pants on. That alone will preach. If any preachers out there, putting your pants on will preach. In other words, that was God's way of telling me to be a man. And the very next thing he said were 3 simple words that just struck my heart. He says, face the pain. And I didn't say it right away, but I went, all right, with your help. With your help. It's the only way I'm going to be able to do this. Well, now that was April of that would be April of 2022 that I got up and made a decision to get on with my life, but it's been since middle of December 2021 that I've had any form of narcotics for pain, nothing. And the story doesn't end there. I've gotten better slowly, but the pain is still there. For some odd reason, it took 5 months for me to see a neurologist for the stroke. This is how God works. He never does the same thing twice. He works everybody on where they're at, what they need. What works for me may not work for you, but God will work. Jesus, in the name of Jesus Christ, if you're following him, he takes control. And just put your seatbelt on because it's going to be a fun ride. And I mean that in a good way. It's been a fun ride. I went to see my neurologist. Not only did she find the stroke, she found a problem that I've been dealing with for several years, having these slight brain seizures that were causing, as she termed it, misfire. And if you'll notice real closely, you'll see that I have a coat behind my back. I'm using it for support because the pain is still there. And I'm not squirming as much right at the moment. But after she diagnosed everything, she looked at me and she goes, David, you're in a lot of pain, aren't you? And I went, yes. That's all I said. She goes, is it your back? And I said, yes, it's the lower back. And then I proceeded to tell her of the odyssey that I went through. And by the way, I don't know if I brought this up, there was a minimum, and I mean a bare minimum, of 30,000 pills that I took. A bare minimum, because I did the math. Between the narcotics, the tramadol, and I got myself off it was killing my teeth. All of a sudden I was having every other month I was chipping a tooth or breaking, or it was killing my teeth. Minimum 30,000 narcotics that I had taken, and I was no better off. Now that I was off of them, this is going to sound a little funny, but the pain was a little higher, but I felt better. I'm going to let you try to make sense of that. No, I was hurting a little more, but I felt better. And then the pain changed. Instead of it being constant, it was starting to fluctuate. It was going up and down. When I start to do something, it'd get a little higher. When I relax a little bit, it would calm down. So it was starting to act normal. All some pain pills did was mask the true thing. Anyway, my neurologist, she goes, it's your lower back? I said, yes. She says, do you have an MRI? And I said, well, I got one that's 2 years old, but 4 doctors said they didn't see anything wrong other than a little disc degeneration, that's all. She goes, well, I want to see it. And I went, please do. Now, my wife said 10 seconds. I'll give her 30 seconds. It took her that long to find the problem. The problem's right here. And I went, what? I mean, she goes, it's right here. You want to see it? And I went, sure. So she turned the camera screen, she turned the computer screen around where Joan and I could see it. She said, you see your spine? Yeah. You see the farther down it goes? You see how narrow it's getting? And I went, nobody ever showed me that. She said, you see all these discs? See how they're pressing? Nobody showed me that. This is 6 doctors before her. She was the 7th. Now there's a little kind of a neat thing to that. She says it's spinal stenosis. And I'm like, then I lost it. I wasn't mad at her. But if I didn't vent right then and there, I might have exploded. I said, do you have any idea of what I've been through? 12 and I went through the whole scheme, the pain and everything. And then she goes, and if this would have been a buddy of mine, I would have laughed it off, but this is my neurologist. She goes, David, if you don't calm down, you're going to have another stroke. And then the Lord intervened. He spoke so clear to my heart, and he goes, this is something else that someday I'll share on this, I believe on this platform. When I was operated on way back in 1982, I was in a semi-coma they had me in a coma. This was old school, the way they used to do it. They had me in a coma for pretty much 3, 4, 5 days. I think it was 4 days. They had me out, and I don't remember anything. But the Lord met me in that time. And one of the things that he shared with me, he reminded me of that day. And he goes, you are going to go through things in life that you are not going to have any answers for. And he says, but the time's going to come when you get back here with me, because during this vision or dream, whatever it was, I was in his presence. He says, you are going to be back here with me, and it's not going to matter. He didn't tell me he was going to answer the questions. He didn't tell me he was going to give me the answers. But he did tell me that when you get here with me, it won't matter anymore. None of anything, the things that we go through in life, cannot be compared to the glory that's going to be revealed in us. And I'm speaking to the Christians. If you don't know the Lord, it's time. This is your time. You can kick the drugs. You can beat them. I did it cold turkey. It was hard. I never do anything easy. Everything I do is hard, but it worked. And now that I'm off, not only did I'm free of the drugs, I had my 25th kidney stone last few months ago, and I didn't want to go to the hospital because they never did anything for me. And the reason they did, because I had all these pills in me. Well, now I didn't have any pills. Well, they went in there and they went, oh, you have a history of kidney stones. I said, yes, I do. Come with us. They put me on an IV within a minute. They knocked the pain down. Why? Because my body no longer had any narcotics in it, and it affected me like it was supposed to when you really need it. And if anybody's ever had a kidney stone, and you males especially, you know the pain that I'm talking about. So let me close with this. I could go on testimony-wise, but now the doctors, matter of fact, I just left the doctors, or the hospital. They did another MRI. They're making sure they're getting ready to properly treat what's wrong with me. I'm going to be pain-free here, I believe, in a very short, distant future. Not very long. I'm going to feel like a new man, and everything happens for a reason. We don't have the answers. Sometimes we get them, but rarely. Rarely do we struggle with things in life do we get any answers for. But if you know the Lord, it's okay. He promised us in his scripture, you will have tribulation. He's talking to those that know him. You will have tribulation, but be of good courage. I have overcome the world. And I would not trade these last 12 years, 13 years for anything. Pain is a great teacher. And it teaches you things. It humbles you. It causes you to trust in God. You know, I know I'm running out of time here. But Paul had this thorn in the flesh. You read in 2 Corinthians. And he said 3 times he went to the Lord about it. And the Lord said, your weakness, my strength is made perfect in your weakness. And Paul held on to that scripture. We don't know what the thorn of the flesh is. I have heard everybody said, no, it was this, no, it was that. And being a retired Bible teacher, I've 35 years, I will tell you, we don't know. And there's a reason why we don't know. Because whatever your thorn in the flesh is, God's strength will be made perfect in your weakness. We don't know if it was mental, physical, spiritual. We don't know. But we do know that it was an enemy sent to torment him, to bother him. So we get some clue. It's coming from the devil, but the Lord allowed it. Somewhere along the line, we don't have the answers. We don't know. But for those of you that are struggling with drugs, and I can guarantee you, I was not an addict. I was a drug, it's the word, I just had it. Drug dependent. And same road, different things. We're going through different things, but it's your time not only to get off drugs, that's just a partial blessing. The real blessing lasts forever, and that's knowing Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. And you know what? I'm going to turn this over to Lydia for what little time we have left. Do we have any time left? You know what? She said, accept the Lord as your personal Savior. Ask Him for forgiveness. Be willing to turn from your sin. Get involved in a church, a good Bible-believing church, and your life will change. You're still going to have problems, but you're not going to be alone anymore. You will have a friend that sticks closer than a brother, and his name is Jesus. I thank you for this time. God bless you.